For that kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me to have the opportunity here today to speak with you at this really important and exciting occasion. It's a great privilege for me to be part of this. This is my fourth visit to this amazing city of Kiev. My first was in 1992, so quite soon after Ukraine had regained its status as a proud independent nation. I was most recently here in May of this year, and I'm so pleased to be back here to support reformers in government, reformers in civil society and in business who are driving progress in this new beginning for Ukraine following the Maidan revolution. Well, you've heard a bit about me and my background, a long and checkered career in politics and government, which I finally exited in 2016, 18 months or so ago, from working with Margaret Thatcher as a minister in the 1980s, but most recently in government, in the coalition government in Britain from 2010 to 2015, where I was the cabinet minister with responsibility for a reform program that, relevant to today, had three strands which are closely interlinked and intertwined. And the first was efficiency. We pursued a vigorous cost-cutting program arising out of the fiscal crisis that Britain had at that time, a budget deficit of some 11% of GDP, a completely unsustainable budget deficit. The second element, digital. We aimed to make the British government the most digital government in the world. And the third, and most relevant to today, open data, transparency and open data. Well, on efficiency, we saved in the space of 5 years, if you added up the savings every year, some $75 billion. From essentially the running costs, the overhead costs of government. So we renegotiated contracts with the biggest suppliers to government, simply taking money out of what we were paying to them. We downsized the civil service by some 20%. We exited properties, real estate that we didn't need. We reorganized property to save money and to make government work more efficiently. We reformed the way major government projects were managed. 2/3 of them were running way over budget and over time, and we more or less halved that failure rate. We reformed public sector pensions. We attacked fraud and money which was wasted through mistakes being made in welfare payments and tax collection. And of course, none of this was revolutionary. None of this, as they say, was rocket science. It's what any business would do. A business which faces a financial crisis and needs to cut its costs, these are the things that a business would do. And what was revolutionary about it was that it was a government that was doing it, and no government, so far as I know, had done these things in this way with quite such success. And the key to it was that without those cost-cutting savings, those efficiency savings from the running costs of government, then otherwise there would have been more tax rises, more cuts to public services on which citizens depend, or to cuts to welfare payments. So these were savings in public spending that protected citizens and taxpayers who, as a politician, I would never forget, are also, of course, voters. And the relevance to the Ukraine of talking about this, well, when you make cost savings of this kind, what it does is open up other possibilities for the use of public money, including, of course, one possibility is investing in the current and the next generation of public servants. So the next element, digital. Well, our predecessors in government in the UK had committed to a digital revolution, but we discovered that one of the that a service could be defined as having gone online if a citizen was able to download a form off the web, print it, fill it out by hand, put it in an envelope and post it back. That's not digital as we saw it. So what did we do? We set up the Government Digital Service, GDS. It's been replicated, copied elsewhere. President Obama explicitly says that he modeled the US Digital Service and 18F on what we had created in the GDS. In Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, now the Prime Minister, before he was Prime Minister, I suddenly got an email in my inbox that simply said, Francis, if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, you should be feeling very flattered. They had set up something modeled also on our GDS. And we started with publication. How does government communicate? How does it provide information to the public? We discovered that there were around 1,500 different government websites. Inconsistent, overlapping, some in conflict with each other, saying different things, impenetrable, expensive, and very wasteful. And crucially important, not there for the benefit of citizens. It was configured around the convenience of government, not the needs and convenience of the users, who are our citizens. And so we created one government web presence, gov.uk. It's a single web presence. It is totally fashioned around user need. Our mantra always was, what is the user need? In the GDS office, which overlooked a busy metro station, the guys blanked out a window and then cut a small hole in it. So if you were standing by it, all you could see was people going in and out of the metro station. And then someone wrote with an arrow pointing to the hole, users, to make people remember that everything was about users, not about the government. And yet we typically in government, we expect the citizen to adapt, and businesses who have to interact with government, we expect them to adapt themselves to how government happens to be organized. And that's wrong. No business would succeed if they do that. We have to make ourselves irresistible. And why did people not typically use government digital services? Because they weren't very good. And so if you had a 50% failure rate where it didn't work for people, so they had to pick up the phone or go to the office to do it, then of course you're not creating digital government, nor are you making the efficiency savings, both for government and, crucially, for the citizen and for businesses. So gov.uk, open source code used by other governments, New Zealand, Israel, and now others, and award-winning. And as I say, services, transforming services. And when I say transforming services, I don't mean we just put a nice, pretty front end on the services. Our approach was to say you need to redesign the process end to end. If digitizing is all about automating an existing process, you're not creating a genuine online service. And last year, after all of those efforts, and by no means perfect, and a huge amount more still to do in the UK, the UN ranked Britain top in the world for digital government. And the third strand, open data and transparency. We said we wanted to be the most open government in the world. Why? Well, you've heard already in the speeches, the excellent speeches that preceded this, the reasons why open data and transparency is the way of the future. I said in my speech at the launch of the Open Government Partnership in 2011, just about exactly 6 years ago in New York at the meeting of the UN General Assembly. And I said then, I quoted the Victor Hugo, the great novelist, who said, "Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come." And I said, transparency is an idea whose time has come, and everything that's happened since then has borne that out. The growth of the Open Government Partnership, a partnership, yes, between governments, now 75 different governments around the world, but crucially a partnership with civil society organizations as well. And that is a crucial element in it being as successful as it has been. And so you've heard the reasons. Why do we do open data and transparency? Well, it rebuilds trust. Trust in every country that I know between the citizen and government has fallen. This is a way of rebuilding trust, being open with people, showing people the workings in government, what's happening, what is the performance, with real quantifiable data that can be checked and verified, and this rebuilds trust. It creates accountability, and sometimes this is uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable for politicians, and it's uncomfortable for bureaucrats as well, but it makes us perform better. It makes government work better. Like everybody who considers themselves to be a digital native, the top of my laptop is covered with stickers, and one of them simply says, "Make things open, it makes things better." And it makes us work better and perform better, and it can take us out of our comfort zone, but if we're going to make progress, serious progress, make our countries better, then we do need to make things open. It drives efficiency for all the reasons you've heard. The comparative data that citizens will have access to, making choices, it drives efficiency. And of course, it supports the tech ecosystem. Data is a raw material. The first industrial revolution, the raw materials were coal and iron. Here we are in a factory, and yet we're in the fourth industrial revolution, and the raw material is data. And I was just reflecting a little earlier how often I have visited and made speeches about data with a data-based audience in old industrial buildings, and I like the circularity of that, the sense of progress. This is a raw material. And here in Ukraine, where you have such a flourishing and talented and skilled base of highly qualified tech people, this is a huge opportunity. Governments sit on vast amounts of data, more actually than they know about. And if we release that data, it's a raw material for the enterprising, the creative, the energetic to use and develop and exploit, which creates jobs and wealth for the country. It can contribute vigorously to economic growth. And does everybody always agree with it? No. We encountered all sorts of resistance and opposition to releasing open data, and we tapped into a surprising vein of creativity in government, people finding all sorts of creative reasons why particular data sets couldn't be released. National security is always a good one, top of the list. Commercial confidentiality, they tried that one. Privacy, always good, always unnerves politicians, so that's always often used. Security of personal data, and legal reasons. You're often told the law won't allow this data to be released. So most commonly heard words in my office were, "Show me the chapter and verse, show me the law." 9 times out of 10, it turned out not to be the case. The law perfectly indifferent to whether it was done. And finally, people used to say, "Well, Minister, of course we want to release the data, but the quality isn't very good at the moment, so we need some time to clean it up and make it better." And my response always was, publish it, and you'll find it gets better, quite quickly. Partly because it's just embarrassing to have inaccurate databases out there. Partly it gets crowdsourced. The accuracy gets crowdsourced. So get it out there, make it open, it makes it better. So OGP, now 75 governments combining to work together, and I always think of that as a support network for reformers. There are lots of different reasons for those 75 governments to have joined the OGP. They're governments from countries at very different stages of political and economic development, very different geographies, very different cultures, but all of them have seen open government, transparency, open data as the motor for change and improvement. They're all on a journey. They're all starting from different places. They will end up in different places, but they're all on a journey, and open data is part of the motor that drives them on that journey. So why is this particularly relevant here in Ukraine? Well, Ukraine isn't by any means the only country in the world to suffer from corruption, but I feel Ukraine has so much going for it. This is such a fantastic country. I mean, this incredibly talented, highly educated population here, this entrepreneurial culture and history, these strong tech capabilities that I referred to, all of these natural resources that Ukraine has especially, but not at all alone in the field of agriculture. And just walking around Kiev, as I have done in this last couple of days, you just drink in and feel this sense of its history as one of Europe's great commercial cities. And corruption's not just unfair. Yes, it's like a tax that takes from the poorer and gives to the richer, but it's a massive drag anchor on economic growth. It slows down growth. It stops a country achieving what it can achieve. And open data and digital are essential tools in the fight against corruption. Well, there's been lots done here already, and I congratulate those who've done it since the Maidan Revolution. Ukraine has opened up key anti-corruption data sets. Procurement. I've seen what's been done with ProZorro. It's world-leading. It's terrific. Huge congratulations on that. Rightly an award-winning application. The company register, beneficial ownership data, spending, court decisions, and rightly Ukraine the first country to join the global beneficial ownership register. And Ukraine, as has been said, jumped 18 places in the open data barometer from 62 to 44, the biggest jump compared with other countries. So is that all over? Is it all done? Has enough been done? Absolutely not. Great progress, but actually, as you've heard, every government is seeking to make progress. This is a very competitive field. In an age when capital is mobile, when businesses and people are looking for the best place to put to work their money, their energy, their ideas, there's a very competitive environment. So all governments are competing to create the most attractive environment for business and investment. And so here in Ukraine, we're in the foothills of what can be done with open data. There is much, much more to do and huge prizes ahead for the reformers who make that happen. And digital is key to the fight against corruption as well. Make a process digital, make a process a way a business or an individual has to interact with the government, with the state, put that online, and you cut out the intermediary. You cut out the petty bureaucracy, which can be the vehicle for petty corruption. And sometimes we forget that the Arab Spring in 2011 was triggered not by the fight against dictatorship and the fight for political freedom, but by a reaction against exactly that petty corruption on a small scale of a small trader who was frustrated deeply by yet again having to give a backhander to a petty bureaucrat in order to carry on his normal lawful activity. This is hugely important. So digital can be a key driver in the fight against corruption. So what are the challenges for reformers as you take these next steps on this incredibly important journey? It isn't working out what to do. In most activities, certainly in government, working out what to do is at best 10% of the challenge. 90% of the challenge is working out how are we going to make it happen? It's implementation, execution. How are we going to overcome the resistance? And it's hard, but the prize is enormous. And the political rewards for reformers are great. Yes, it needs political will from the top of government, absolutely. Yes, it needs energetic and passionate politicians gripping the agenda and running with it. It needs proper expertise, lots of it around here in Ukraine, but much internationally as well. When I embarked on our open data program, I put in place a transparency board with the top experts in open data, including Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. So when people in government, bureaucrats and politicians, my ministerial colleagues came to me and said, we can't possibly, for these and that reason, publish this open data, they could knock down the objections. They were technically skilled enough and knowledgeable enough to overcome the objections. So you need that expertise available. You need to find and mobilize the enthusiasts within the bureaucracy, and they will be there, and there will be more and more as you move on. You need support from the business community. You need to engage the business community with this journey and this challenge, and you need support from civil society. You need to, who need to work with government to identify who the reformers are, support them, and reward them with praise when they do things, because nothing is more frustrating when you're in the beleaguered role of a reformer, when you're doing everything you can to make progress, and you are making progress, and all you hear is complaints that not enough is being done. You need to reward the progress that is being made. So all of these that I've talked about, efficiency, digital, open data, these are all ideologically neutral. There are, around the world, enthusiasts for all of these at every part of the political spectrum, from left through to right. And there are opponents at every part of the political spectrum as well. The real divide is not between left, right, or center. It is reformers versus resistors. And I just finish with this thought. Reformers who are brave, principled, do what they deeply believe to be right, and communicate what they're doing and why they're doing it consistently and passionately, these reformers gain the respect and the support of the public. I wish my reforming friends in the Ukraine the very best of success. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Френсіс.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. I will still ask you to stay here for 5 minutes. We're having... So, my friends, if you have any questions for Mr. Francis, please ask him, and I would ask to give headphones to Mr. Francis now. Thank you. So, have you got any questions for Mr. Francis? We don't have lots of time, but still, please. You can take my microphone. Oh, this girl is running quicker than I do. Okay.
I have a question to you as evangelist of open data, and my question is, do you have some sort of, or do you develop some sort of SLAs between providers of open data to the business? Because sometimes we feel like, I mean, trying to establish business on open data, and sometimes I feel that I don't have any guarantees that next release or next day data will be the same and same format and so on.
Well, I understand the point. All right, okay. I understand the point you make, and so is the point that the data isn't updated sufficiently regularly, or you don't know what the next release of a new data set is going to be?
Guarantees that it will be continuously delivered in the future.
Okay. I mean, one of the things we grappled with was in our early days, and actually the US government, the Obama administration, which was the trailblazer in open data, they released vast quantities of data sets, but there was beginning to be a complaint from the data community that these weren't the data sets that were needed, that were useful. And we fell into that trap as well a bit. We were releasing data that wasn't the most useful for being used by social entrepreneurs and commercial entrepreneurs. And we set up a user group with representatives from the data community who advised us on what was the next thing to go for. It's not the only consideration, because there are all the accountability issues as well, and the things you need to do to open up government generally. But there was no point in releasing data sets which were meant to be for the benefit of the data community if they weren't what was going to be useful. So I think having some means of gauging what's useful is important.
Мені здається, секунду, що пан розробник...
It seems to me that Mr. Developer means that Ukraine may have a situation, or maybe it was possible, when the next Ministry of Economy comes and says, sorry, everything was wrong, it's not working anymore, we won't work in this way, we'll have closed data now, not open one. But you'll have an opportunity to ask this question during the next panel discussions for the representatives of Cabinet of Ministers. I think this question suits for them more. So did you get the response? Super. There was more questions? There were more questions here?
Deputy Director of Ukraine Invest, which is the Ukrainian government's official investment promotion agency. We work very close with UK advisors, having a look at the Great Britain campaign, right, which has been instrumental in driving investment and tourism and a lot of things into the United Kingdom. Can you put an approximate dollar amount or pound amount, as it would be, on how open data has influenced investment? Because there are some big figures as far as what Great Britain did. It'll be interesting to know if you can kind of be a little bit more specific, if that's tracked at all, the impact on actual investment into the country and within the country on the part of open data.
Yeah. I don't think I do have that number, except that I think it's probably a pretty big one, but I agree that's not very specific. But my friend and colleague Richard Sterling, who's here, and colleagues from the Open Data Institute probably can give you a better number on that. But I think that there has been some work done on trying to track it and quantify it, but I don't have that number at my fingertips, I'm afraid.
Отже, і останнє запитання, на жаль, вас мало.
And the last question, unfortunately we're short of time.
My name is Eugene Kotuch. I represent the state company Public Finance, which is a developer and administrator of a governmental portal which called eData or Spending.gov.ua. We are working close to Ministry of Finance. And my question is, could you please suggest any features or functionality for the open data developers here in Ukraine which can make possible to make our portals and our data more popular worldwide, like multi-language portal localization, or any feature which you think make us better for the leading industries in the world, to make us more popular and well known in open data society in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question, and I don't have a quick, glib answer. But I'll take that away and think about that, and because that is, you're absolutely on the right thing. Great to release data. How do you make it available in the right way, through the right channels, to the people who are going to use it, right? I mean, the priority actually has to be making it available to Ukrainian citizens and businesses and civil society, so that they can hold the government to account and help the reformers in government on the journey of reform that they're on. That should be the priority. But it is very important, as part of Ukraine's message to the world as a center for business, that the data is presented and shown to be available and usable in the best possible way. So great question. I don't have a quick answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much.
І ще останнє.
And the last question, please.
Former director in the European Commission, congratulations on a very interesting talk. I followed your journey since the Malmö Declaration in 2009. So, to what extent, without being falsely modest, do you think the success in the UK was due to the fact that you were a political insider with a certain credibility vis-à-vis the other ministers, so that you, as a heavyweight politician, were the leader rather than somebody who was young without the credibility with their peers?
Well, I mean, I think there's something in that. I had the advantage of being long in the tooth. I'd been around a long time. I was perfectly happily coming to the end of my political career. This was, I thought, the last job I was going to do in government, and I was very happy with that. Some of the things I was doing encouraged some senior people in the civil service to try to organize me moving to other roles, promotion, moving sideways, firing, but I hung on for 5 years. And I didn't mind who I rubbed up the wrong way, and that was important. And having been senior in my party and having held some of the most senior roles, again, that kind of lent credibility. But that's not. I'm not the only person in that category, and you also needed all the other things. You needed a prime minister, head of the government, who got it and supported it, and who would always back me up. You needed some great civil servants who were zealots and enthusiasts. You needed the outside expertise to knock down the naysayers, and they were fantastic. I mean, I always remember a time when the current Chancellor of the Exchequer actually was being lectured by a relatively junior academic on the merits of competition and the market economy. One of the most pleasurable moments in my career. So you need all of those elements because there is resistance. I mean, most governments have a bias to inertia, and you need to replace it with a bias to action, and you need people around who will energize and drive it.
Дуже вам дякую за відповіді.
Thank you so much for your answers. Mr. Francis Maude, please. Thank you for the questions. And now we're having